Now, I just want to go through some of the theory behind collision detection before we get started. The logic is here, and one of the things that you need to consider to get a visual of what's happening is think about your images or your cursors at this point that we're talking about like two rectangles. So, this first little statement here is looking to make sure that, well, if my x-coordinate for my one image is greater than or equal to this edge right here, and at the same time, if it's less than or equal to this edge over here, well, then somewhere our x's are going to overlap within the x direction. And the second condition that you need to check for is, well, when we're less than this, right? When I'm less than this edge and greater than this edge, then I know that I have intersection in the x direction. It can be, this edge or this edge, and that's where we end up having, you have a collection of and or logic, and really important to kind of understand the theory behind this. But you can use this as a guideline to develop your own statements, and I'm going to walk you through how to do it with mine. Okay, so I have my REPL open. For each image, what I want to do is I want to create a rectangle. So I'm going to call this rectangle 1 and set that equal to a rectangle kind of function in Pygame .rect. Okay, and rect takes a few parameters. One of them is the image positions. So x image 1 and y image 1 are going to be the coordinates of our rectangle. And so that means when I'm including these, it means that this rectangle is going to always take the coordinates of my first cursor image. Now I need to define the size of my rectangle, and that's where I'm going to use my cursor image size. And in the x direction, the width, for the height, I'm going to use the height of my cursor image size. Now I want to do this for each image that I have. Okay, so I'm going to use for my cursor so that you can actually see a visual of what's happening. So in this case, I'm going to call this rect2, and changing this to image 2, 2, and the last one, the last one is 2. I create a couple different counters. Okay, so I'm going to call this counter x, and this is going to count our intersections in the x direction. I'm going to show you how to do them individually and then combine the logical statement. Okay, so I have my counters and I've defined my rectangles. Now, one thing that you need to think about, and this is kind of like when we're dealing with Photoshop or Premiere or video editing and things like that. Well, things are displayed in layers. You're actually using Pygame .draw. Okay, draw a rectangle. Where do we want to draw it? We want to draw it on the screen. Actually, we want to add a color first. So in this case, I'm going to use 255, 0, 0, and I believe that is the color red. And then now I need to add the coordinates of where I want this. I'm going to add the same code that I added to my rectangle at the top here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy it for rectangle 1. Control C. In my rectangle here, Control V. I want to stretch this out so that you can see it all kind of written on one line. There you go. So we've drawn the rectangle behind cursor image 1. Now I want to draw another rectangle behind cursor image 2. And so I'm going to copy this, Control C, Control V. And remember that I'm changing these here, and these are just the other coordinates of my rectangle, x image 2 and y image 2, cursor image 2 size, cursor image 2 size. Okay, now let's run it and see what we get. Okay, so there you go. We have a couple of cursors, and behind them we have rectangles. And you can see that they're both moving, which is great. Let's go ahead and add the code for intersection in the x direction. One of the first things I want to do, I'm going to comment out this print mouse position. So we can scroll down and we can start to add our code for collision in the x direction. So I'm going to add a little comment for collision in the x direction. Underneath there, I'm going to start to begin my if statement. Begin with an open bracket, and we're going to use x image 1 greater than equal to x image 2. And x image 1 less than or equal to x image 2 plus cursor image 2 size in the x direction, or x image 1 plus cursor image 1 size in the x direction is greater than or equal to x image 2, and x image 1 plus cursor image 1 size is less than or equal to x image 2 plus cursor image 2 size. And the last thing I want to do is add my closing bracket, the colon. First we have to update our x counter. Counter x plus equals 1. And then we want to print counter x. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this and see how it goes. One thing I need to make sure, I have to make sure that I have my indentation correct. Now that my if is within my while loop, I can run it. So let's just check here. I'm going to use my blue hand, my blue cursor, and so you should start to see a print statement. That's good. Now as we overlap, and it should stop when we pass. Okay, so it's working for the blue, and then if I move the black, it should also work as we pass. So there's our code for intersection in the x direction. We can keep track of it using the counter, and print it using the simple print statement just to see how that displays on the screen. Now the next step is to add the same condition but for y. So I'm going to copy all this code, paste it, and now I'm going to start to change these for y. All the x's become y's, and our zeros for the sizes become 1s. And what I want to do here is I want to update my counter y, and print my counter y to the screen. And let's do a test. So right now we should have no intersection. I'm going to use my blue cursor because I can control that a little more. And so going up and down, I should have intersection in the y direction. So you can see that it starts to begin. They have the heights are overlapping, and then it stops when I pass. Now I should also have intersection in the x direction, and you see that it works like that. But what I need to do is I need to have this only happen when they're overlapping. You can see that you can do these things individually. Maybe you have an application for that in your game. But a simple little fix is, now that you have this in the x and y, is to add a logical operator and. Okay, so that's why I put this first thing in brackets. I'm going to add my and statement here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy everything, including the brackets, Control C, Control V, and you can see that now we have both conditions in there. So if there's intersection in the x and intersection in the y, we're going to update counter x. And for now, I'm just going to comment out my y. Okay, stop this, and we can do a test. Okay, so I'm going to use my blue again. So you see that right now I should have intersection in the x, and it's not printing. So that means that the individual condition isn't working, and the individual condition for the y isn't working. But now, once I overlap, I'm starting to get intersection, and you can see that that's working. There we go. We have intersection in the x and y direction. One of the nice kind of obvious things to do is kind of transition this, and we could, and some people would call it a score. Some people might call it a health. If you're health, you might be subtracting. For a score, you might be adding. I'm going to update my comment here, but this is x. Intersection in the x and y direction. What we could do is call this a score, and I'm going to print the score to the screen. So I can say score space with a comma and then print score. And just remember up here, I'm going to add my score counter at the top. Let's see what our print statement looks like now. And we get our score is slowly, it's slowly printing to the screen. And we get a little bit more information by, adding that little bit of a print statement. But ideally, where do we want the score? We want the score to display on the actual screen. So, in another tutorial, I'll show you how we can modify some of our text statements to create a score that displays on the screen. So for now, I hope that helps. It's it can be a very challenging concept to understand and also to code. You can easily make mistakes with indentation, and it's important to, take it step by step. Start in the X direction, try in the Y, and then once you have those two statements or those two conditions correct, combine them so that you know that you're working in both directions. Then it can be a lot easier to debug your code and save yourself a lot of frustration. So I hope that helps, and stay tuned for more. We're going to add a score and look at how we can use score to, maybe change background screens, have game over screens, and things like that.